In this video, we'll discuss practical and scientifically proven techniques that can help us think better. But before diving into the scientific literature, let's take a closer look at the thinking process itself. How do people actually think? What specific actions are involved? It's logical to assume that thinking, like any other process, requires time and attention. However, most people don't have a slot in their schedule labeled time to think. For some reason, many assume that deep, meaningful thinking happens automatically on its own, squeezed between lunch, watching YouTube, and chatting with friends. In reality, that's not the case. To think something through thoroughly, our brains need time and calm. We need to be alone and allow our heads to digest previously received information. For our ancestors, this happened organically. For instance, during a hunt, one could wait for hours for prey. There were no smartphones in hand or TVs nearby, just the silence and serenity of nature. Under these conditions, hunters immersed themselves in their thoughts. The same occurred while mowing grass, doing laundry, fishing, or chopping wood. So our bodies are adapted to spending most of our time in reflection. However, modern humans spend the majority of their time consuming information. For example, teenagers today spend nearly 9 hours a day looking at screens, and that doesn't include school or homework. For adults, that number is over 10 hours, and these are very conservative figures recorded before the worldwide lockdown. Thus, modern people rarely find themselves alone with their thoughts. In other words, they aren't thinking. They fill every free moment with their gadgets and yet sincerely believe they've been pondering something. Independent thought isn't possible under these conditions. Moreover, modern people dislike thinking so much that they would rather experience physical pain than do it. In one study, people were given a choice: spend 10 minutes in silence alone or leave, but receive an electric shock. Most chose the second option. Why? Because they were bored. Yet according to research, this feeling of boredom, which people so fiercely try to avoid, is the main precursor to creativity and interesting ideas. In his book Out of My Skull, The Psychology of Boredom, James Dankert explains why this is. Boredom is an unpleasant feeling. We experience discomfort and try to occupy ourselves to escape it. For example, we start thinking about our place in the world, how something works, or how to improve our lives. Something similar happens when we daydream. Our consciousness drifts into deep, hidden corners of the world, retrieving creative images and enhancing our thinking. So, it's fair to say that the boredom and silence modern people so dislike are the foundation of thinking. Therefore, anyone who wants to think must allocate time to do so. Now let's talk about what can help us with this. First, try talking to yourself out loud. In childhood, to understand ourselves, we often talk to ourselves. This accelerates our development, boosts creativity, and helps us better understand our own emotions and the world around us. But over time, under pressure from social norms, we stop speaking aloud and start thinking silently. However, the benefits of self-talk don't disappear. Notice that when you're engaged in something intellectually demanding, you might unintentionally say something or even just move your lips silently. You utter fragments of words and sentences that seem meaningless to an outside observer, but you're not doing it for no reason. It helps you. Research shows this helps us think better. For example, in a 2011 study, subjects were asked to find specific objects in a picture. One group simply searched, while the other repeated aloud what they were looking for. For instance, giraffe, giraffe, giraffe. The second group found the object significantly faster and with fewer errors. By saying something aloud, we force our brains to concentrate on one thing. We slow down the chaotic thought process. Thoughts stop floating in an endless, chaotic stream of vague ideas and instead anchor themselves to what was just said. Charles Fernyhough, in his book The Voices Within, showed that inner speech improves a range of cognitive functions in adults. For example, we solve problems more effectively, become more creative, and improve our working memory. You don't have to constantly talk to yourself out loud. But if there's an important idea you want to understand and explore more deeply, don't hesitate to communicate with yourself, or at least whisper something to yourself occasionally. You're not crazy. You're just optimizing your thinking. Second, start walking. A large body of research shows that movement improves a range of cognitive functions. We learn faster, our reaction times improve, we speak better, think better, and find interesting ideas more quickly. The reason is that during walking, the heart works more actively, supplying organs, including the brain, with blood. That's why we see that after exercise, people perform better on memory and attention tests, and their creativity increases significantly. In fact, walking creates ideal conditions for reflection. Your brain is very active, but since you're not doing anything except moving monotonously, your consciousness has nothing to latch onto, so it turns inward. Scientists consider this state ideal for innovation. Unsurprisingly, people known for innovation practiced and recommended walks. Plato, Aristotle, Beethoven, Einstein, Darwin, Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Charles Dickens, Goethe, Steve Jobs, and thousands of other great minds systematically took long walks and considered them a crucial tool in their creative arsenal. Where you walk also matters. In a recent study by Mark Berman from the University of Southern California, a group of students walking in a park performed better on various tests than a group walking in the city. This is likely because the city has too many stimuli, people, cars, signs, and bright lights, that prevent full immersion in your inner world. In a park, the environment is much less stimulating. Third, start thinking before bed. Many know that if you study something before sleep, you'll remember it better. This isn't just folk wisdom. Scientific research confirms it. However, people less often talk about the fact that improved memory isn't the only benefit. Another old saying, "Morning is wiser than evening," also appears to have solid grounds. It turns out that sleeping on a problem isn't such a bad idea. Recent scientific work shows that if you think about a problem before bed, you're 55% more likely to solve it in the morning. Many scientists believe that during sleep, we re-experience past events and connect them with the most important thoughts. New connections form in our brains, and in the morning, we find that we have new ideas. This is why subjects answer questions they pondered before sleep more accurately. Fourth, think about how you think. Let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. But if you have a specific task to solve, a question to answer, or an idea that needs reflection, start using metacognition. This method has shown high effectiveness in research. In a 2015 study, students were divided into two groups. The first group was simply reminded of an upcoming exam. The second group was asked two questions. What grade do you want to get? And what do you need to improve to get that grade? As a result, students from the second group performed significantly better on the test. The point is, we aren't as rational as we think. We don't know what we don't know. To understand the boundaries of our comprehension, we need others to point it out, or we must honestly answer where our gaps are. Metacognition is about self-analysis, thinking about thinking. We ask ourselves, what do I need to do to solve this? What don't I know? What is unclear? Can I explain my ideas? Should I ask advice from knowledgeable people? What question am I trying to answer? How can I patch the holes? How can I think better? In other words, we explore our understanding. Many scientific papers show the high effectiveness of this approach. Of course, my method won't work for everyone, but personally I debate with myself, trying with all my might to find holes in my knowledge. I pick a topic, invent a staunch opponent and start arguing with them. The goal is simple, to find my mistakes. There are always mistakes. It doesn't matter what form your metacognition takes. The important thing is to practice it periodically. So, let's summarize. To think properly, you need to allocate time to think. The ideal time to set aside is the evening, shortly before sleep. The ideal conditions are a walk in the park, where no one will look at you sideways if you mutter to yourself. And of course, ideally, you should occasionally ask yourself how you can think better. I hope this video was helpful to you. Best of luck.